terrible for all the people concerned, and really politics should be dropped out of it, and we should be concentrating on the humanitarian aid aspect. But of course, the BBC is never, ever going to miss an opportunity to get in its political agenda. It likes the death, it doesn't care about the people.
Okay, let's move over to Ukraine then. And well, first of all, Ukraine seems to be replacing their defense minister. So the chaos within the Ukrainian government continues. Let's just bring a little bit of text on screen here. So the majority leader of the Ukrainian parliament said on Sunday that Kyrylo Budanov, who's currently the head of the Ukrainian intelligence services, I believe, is becoming the defense minister. And it's being done to strengthen military-industrial cooperation, which is absolutely logical, he said. What do you think about that?
Well, if we look at Ukraine overall, Mike, what we've got is a dictatorship. And I think what's happening is Zelensky is conducting a purge. He's doing a purge because the West has said, if you don't get rid of the corruption, you're not going to get the money, you won't get the weapons. So this is now a full-blown dictatorship around Zelensky running. And some of these men are going to be pushed to one side if they're mates of Zelensky. He's not going to get rid of them completely. Reznikov is going to move over, we believe, into justice. He's going to become Minister of Justice. So he's got to be pushed aside because he's also said one or two things that I think's upset Zelensky about the conduct of the war. But as we'll see in just a minute, it's becoming very clear what's happening. Have you got anything further on that? This one might. Right. Okay. Let's bring on the man himself. Now, this goes back a couple of days ago. I've chosen the Kiev Post so that we can see what's actually being said in Ukraine as resignation rumours intensify. Well, it's all happened. Defence Minister pledges to help successor achieve victory of Ukraine. And this is the embedded headline from the Kiev Post. Ukraine's secret service exposes the embezzlement of funds allocated for food supply for defense forces. So how cynical do you have to, I mean, you've got troops, whoever they are, fighting and dying on the front line. And while they're on the front line, somebody is working behind to steal their supplies. And this is the nation state that the BBC runs through BBC Media Action, is helping run their state media, covering all of this up. It's an utter disgrace. And we should remember that it was well known, the corruption in Ukraine, before the war started, and yet the BBC still helped this regime put its propaganda machine in place. Utterly disgusting. But if we look at what Reznikov said, it's one person, the commander-in-chief, who decides whether I will be defense minister or not. So he's laid it bare. This is simply now a dictatorship around Zelensky. It's Zelensky who decides who stays and who goes. There's no other pretenses at a democracy. This is a vicious police state, supported, of course, by the BBC. He goes on to say this, or he did go on to say this: I'm convinced that our international partners have faith in the victory of Ukraine. It will remain, and they will continue to support us. There are still planes on my wish list to Santa. Yes, this is an adult speaking here. There are still warplanes on my wish list to Santa. I believe in the victory of Ukraine, and I will do everything for this. And when he says everything for this, he means it, because it doesn't matter whether it's illegal, it's corruption, it's bullying, whatever it is, they are prepared to do it. So I've called this Santa and a pack of lies. And the fact that the BBC supports this disgraceful regime in Ukraine is a crime in itself, I think.
Alex, have you got any thoughts?
I'd like to point out that the tipped successor, as of that leak yesterday, Kyrylo Budanov, who's a major general, is in fact map man. He wasn't the overall head of intelligence until this appointment. He was just the head of the military intelligence department, a notorious hard man. He's served his country in the front line since the beginning of the 2014 phase of the Russia-Ukraine war, been wounded in that capacity. But he's the man who, with a smouldering look on his face, as you'll remember from previous UK column news episodes, invited journalists in and showed them a map with a broad felt tip pen or Sharpie for our American listeners, marking out how Russia was going to be parcelled up. It seems that Budanov has been promoted on the basis of that map. We have an article forthcoming from a Swede on the significance of that map for Scandinavia. Reznikov is one of the more softly spoken men. I'm not sure of the constitutional position. I haven't seen in Ukraine's constitution that the president really is commander-in-chief. Even in the US, this is a debatable point. Congress has actually to award him that title for a given war. So this may just be flowery language. Possibly Reznikov got to the chop because we have to be very careful about numbers because we're talking about people's lives and unconfirmed numbers. But it is said by some quite reputable people, such as Colonel Douglas Macgregor, that Reznikov may have told the Americans on a Washington visit very recently that north of 250,000 Ukrainians had perished in this war. 257,000 is the figure that Colonel Macgregor says Reznikov may have told the Americans.